You know how sometimes you're in a conversation and one single throwaway comment just hits you, and suddenly this whole flood of emotion comes rushing in? Well, today we're diving deep into a story just like that. It's a really personal look at family, feminism, and a powerful shift in perspective that comes from a place of faith.
And this right here is the heart of it all. The tears, they're not really about that one moment. They're the result of a long, exhausting history. It's a feeling so many of us know, but we just don't talk about it enough. So, what was it? What was that one comment that opened the floodgates?
Let's go to that moment. Because it's wild how the smallest spark can set off this huge fire of memory and pain. And it usually happens in the most normal, everyday settings. Okay, so picture this. It's just a casual family chat. The topic is feminism. And specifically, they're talking about the philosopher Aristotle and his, let's say, outdated views on women. It's supposed to be an academic, historical thing, not a personal attack.
And then, that's the comment. It comes out of nowhere, from another room. It wasn't even part of the conversation, but it lands like a bomb, basically validating this ancient prejudice right there in their own home.
And that's why the reaction was so huge. See, it was never really about Aristotle. It was about this constant daily pattern of little cuts, these little dismissals that just drain every ounce of your emotional energy. It leaves you feeling like you always have to be on guard, even with your own family.
So, when you're dealing with that kind of constant drain, what do? Well, the most natural reaction is to just build a wall. You try to protect yourself by avoiding the topic entirely.
But here's the trap, right? Your goal is to protect yourself, and that makes total sense. But the strategy, staying silent, not engaging, it doesn't actually stop the hurt. It just guarantees that the real problem never, ever gets talked about. And little by little, your own self-respect starts to wear away.
Oh, this analogy from the story is just perfect. Avoiding the real conversation is like obsessing over a tiny little chore while the whole foundation of your house is crumbling. It's a surface-level fix for a really, really deep problem.
But here's where things take a turn. What if all this pain, this cycle that feels endless, what if it isn't just a trap? This leads to a pretty profound idea. Maybe this whole struggle is actually an opportunity in disguise.
And that is the question that changes everything. What if this isn't random? What if this challenge, this pain, is in your life for a very specific reason?
This is the big idea. From a spiritual perspective, these difficult people, these tough situations, they aren't just obstacles. They're seen as divine tests. They're challenges that are perfectly tailored for you, designed to help you grow and become a better version of yourself.
So here's the crucial shift. The other person, they're almost secondary. They're just the tool being used in your spiritual journey. The real work, the real opportunity for change, it's not out there with them. It's inside of you.
Now, when you start to see it that way, it's incredibly empowering. You stop being a victim of what's happening to you, and you become an active participant in your own growth. So, okay, how do we actually do this? How do we make it practical?
Think about it like this. We spend so much time and energy in this huge outer circle, the circle of concern, trying to change things we have zero control over, like other people's beliefs. But the real power? It's in this tiny little inner circle, the circle of control. That's your world, your reactions, your words, how you find your peace.
So it boils down to 3 really practical steps. First, practice mindfulness. Start to notice when you're making big general statements yourself. Second, try to understand. Is what they said really an attack, or is it just a clumsy way of trying to connect? And third, change the dynamic. Instead of just reacting, ask a completely different neutral question. That's how you start feeding new, healthier data into this broken pattern.
And you have to remember this, because it's everything. The goal is not to win. It's not to prove you're right or change their mind. The real goal is to find your own peace, is to free yourself from having your happiness depend on how someone else behaves.
So after walking through this whole journey, from deep pain to this place of empowerment, I want to leave you with a few questions. And these aren't easy ones. They're meant for you to sit with, to really reflect on.
And for the men listening, if a conversation about equality, about women's rights, feels like it's a personal attack on you, it's worth asking what's really going on under the surface. What deeper insecurity is being triggered that makes this feel so personal?
And for women, there's a really tough balance to strike. How do you fight for your dignity? How do you stand up for justice
without letting the fight itself harden you, without it closing you off to compassion and your own spiritual growth.
And finally, a question for every single one of us. If our faith traditions promise a just and merciful God, why have so many interpretations, often from scholars we trust, been used to deny half of all people, their voice, their dignity? That's a question we should all carry with us.